Newshub this week released figures from a poll they've done with Reid Research, pointing to perhaps the National Party being in a little bit of trouble when it comes to the latest polls. Let's actually just jump and have a look straight at those numbers. So let's have a look at the poll of the party vote, which shows us that there have been some increases for the left bloc, which is Labour Greens together, a little bit of a decrease for National, kind of putting them almost neck and neck, 42.2 to 45.1. If we jump across to what that would mean seats in the House, if we assume that all people have kept their seats, you see that National can't quite govern with their current coalition, neither can the left bloc, which of course means dun dun dun, Winston Peters becomes balance of power. And the one other thing that perhaps the left bloc are a little bit embarrassed about at the moment, if we have a look at preferred Prime Minister, John Key's still at number one, although he's lost himself a little bit of ground, and Winston Peters holding on steady at the number 2 preferred Prime Minister. So this seems to happen in this cycle every election period. A year out the polls start. Do they mean that much? Probably not. But it gives Winston Peters a lot of air time, I should say. Probably doesn't need any more air. And we start talking about how New Zealand First could be the balance of power. New Zealand First could be the balance of power. They're the guys who sit in the middle. And it's happening again this election cycle. Winston Peters looks like if it was held today on those numbers, he would be the Kingmaker.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously very early. I think the National is probably struggling a bit now, and they're becoming reactive in aspects of what they're doing, like housing and that sort of thing. And governments have a life, don't they, which is limited. And what have they had? Three goes now, and it'll be interesting to see whether they can make it through this election, but I don't think they'll make it to the next, because I rather feel they're on a sort of a downward swing.
Yeah, I think that's probably...
That may change, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's probably fair, but they've had their 3 terms, much like Labour had their 3 terms in the early 2000s. They're due to move on, that's what the cycle would say. But I have to say, Labour performed so abysmally at the last election. If they were to turn it around, even with a so-called left bloc, and be able to win this time around, that would be an almost unheard of turnaround in the space of one election cycle. And of course, they're going to face the problem that Winston Peters has said again and again and again that he won't work with the Greens. So the left bloc is a little bit stuck now, because if they're going to need Winston to actually get on board, Labour has tagged themselves to the Green ship, which I don't think is a bad idea. It's what most of the world does, is a left bloc. But if Winston is going to steadfastly refuse to work with them, then the left bloc is obsolete. He has given a specific notion. In fact, I was going to say you could probably read this from any election cycle, because this is a repetitive theme of Winston. He said, of the idea of who would he go with, who are you going to go with, where are you going to support, what Winston always says is a version of this, quote, "Doing stitch-up deals behind the public's back is what we've never done," which is true. Credit where credit's due. "No one's got any idea what they're going to say next or do next, and to tie yourself to a catastrophic campaign from some other party is stupidity." So he never does a deal, and what he normally says is he said both the party with the most seats and the party with the most votes, but he typically speaks to the party with the most votes first, and then they start negotiating, and then people start saying, will Winston be Deputy Prime Minister? But I have to also say the last 3 or 4 cycles, this has been the conversation a year out, 6 months out, 4 months out, and he's never ended up being the Kingmaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say this far out, and there's all sorts of things conceivably that can happen out there, and often not foreseeable.
No, but you do look at trends as opposed to looking at exacting polls, and I think the comment you made earlier about perhaps Nationals on a little bit of a decline, not catastrophic perhaps, is probably the fairest thing to take out of this Reid Research Newshub poll.